എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഇപ്പോൾ ഒഴിഞ്ഞ കസേരകളാണ് കാണുന്നത് കൂടുതലും. എന്നാലും ഹോള് പെട്ടെന്ന് തന്നെ നിറയും എന്നാണ് എല്ലാവരും എന്നോട് പറയുന്നത്. ഞാൻ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു. ആദ്യത്തെ പ്രോഗ്രാമാണ് ഈ ദിവസത്തെ, അതുകൊണ്ട് പതുക്കെ ആൾക്കാരെ വരുന്നുള്ളൂ. കുറേ സുഹൃത്തുക്കൾ വരാനുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ശിവപ്രകാശ്, എച്ച്.എസ്. ശിവപ്രകാശ്, പ്രൊഫസർ എച്ച്.എസ്. ശിവപ്രകാശ് മലയാളികൾക്ക് സുപരിചിതനാണ് വാസ്തവത്തിൽ. കാര്യം അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു അപരിചിതനല്ല. ഇവിടെ തൃശ്ശൂർ തന്നെ പല പ്രാവശ്യം വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. സംസ്ഥാന നാടക ഫെസ്റ്റിവലിൻ്റെ, നമ്മുടെ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് തിയേറ്റർ ഫെസ്റ്റിവലിൻ്റെ ഡയറക്ടറായിട്ട് 2 പ്രാവശ്യം, ഒന്ന് കൊച്ചിയിലും ഒന്ന് കണ്ണൂരും, ഡി അപ്പുകുട്ടൻ മാഷിൻ്റെ സമയത്ത് ഡയറക്ടറായിരുന്ന സമയത്ത് ആ തിയേറ്റർ ഫെസ്റ്റിവലിൻ്റെ ഡയറക്ടറായിട്ടുണ്ടായി. തന്നെയല്ല ഇദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ മഹാചൈത്ര, സുൽത്താൻ ടിപ്പു പോലെയുള്ള നാടകങ്ങൾ മലയാളത്തിലേക്ക് തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്ത് പബ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. തന്നെയല്ല മലയാളം അറിയും, എനിക്ക് മലയാളം അറിയും എന്ന് എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്നയാളാണ്. മലയാളത്തിൽ സംസാരിക്കാനായിട്ട് ശ്രമിക്കും. പല ഭാഷകളും സംസാരിക്കുന്നയാളാണ്, മലയാളവും സംസാരിക്കും. ഞങ്ങൾ 32 വർഷം മുമ്പാണ് ആദ്യം കണ്ടുമുട്ടുന്നത്. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഞങ്ങൾ സുഹൃത്തുക്കളാണ്. പിന്നെ ഇപ്പം വരെയും ആ സൗഹൃദം വളരെ ഊഷ്മളമായിട്ട് കാത്തു സൂക്ഷിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. 32 വർഷം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ 1991 ജൂലൈ 16 ആ ഡേറ്റ് ഞാൻ ഓർത്തിരിക്കുന്നു പറഞ്ഞാൽ അന്നാണ് എൻ്റെ മകള്, ആ കൂടി എനിക്കൊരു മകനും മകളുമായിട്ടൊരു സന്താനമേ ഉള്ളൂ, അപർണ, അവൾ ജനിച്ചത്. അപ്പോൾ അവളുടെ അമ്മയുടെ പ്രേമയുടെ വീട് ബാംഗ്ലൂരാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങൾ ബാംഗ്ലൂർ പോകുന്നു, ട്രെയിനിൽ വെച്ച് പെയിൻ തുടങ്ങുന്നു. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയുള്ളൊരു ഡ്രമാറ്റിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സംഭവമാണ്. ബാംഗ്ലൂർ നമ്മൾ ലാൻഡ് ചെയ്യുന്നു, വീട്ടിൽ എത്തുന്നു, വീടിന് തൊട്ടടുത്ത് തന്നെ ക്ലിനിക്കിൽ വെച്ച് പ്രസവം നടക്കുന്നു. പക്ഷേ അതിന് പാരലായിട്ട് വേറെ സാധനമുണ്ട്. ഞാനന്ന് സ്കൂൾ ഓഫ് ലെറ്റേഴ്സ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ മഹാത്മാഗാന്ധി യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിൽ അനന്തമൂർത്തി സാർ സെറ്റപ്പ് ചെയ്ത ആ സ്ഥാപനത്തിൽ ഞാൻ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ നമ്മളുടെ പ്രശസ്തനായ കവി, ലിറിസിസ്റ്റ്, ഫിൽം മേക്കർ അൻവർ അലി, മ്യൂസ് മേരി ജോർജ്, ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ സിനിമാ സംവിധായകൻ ബി ഉണ്ണികൃഷ്ണൻ, ഇവരെല്ലാം ഞങ്ങൾ ഫസ്റ്റ് ബാച്ച് എംഫിൽ സ്റ്റുഡൻസാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ആ സമയത്ത് ഞങ്ങളുടെ കോഴ്സെല്ലാം കഴിഞ്ഞു. ഡിസർട്ടേഷൻ ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി അനന്തമൂർത്തി സാറ് CD നരസിംഹയുടെ ധ്വന്യാലോകം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടിലെ ലൈബ്രറി ഉപയോഗിക്കാനായിട്ട് അൻവറിൻ്റെ ഡിസർട്ടേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ആംഗ്ലോഫോൺ ആഫ്രിക്കൻ കവിതകളാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ റീസോഴ്സസ് അവിടുന്ന് ധ്വന്യാലോകയിൽ നിന്ന് തപ്പാനായിട്ട് ഞങ്ങൾ പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു ഈ ട്രിപ്പ്. അന്നേരമാണ് ഇത് സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ ബാംഗ്ലൂരിൽ നിന്ന് മൈസൂരേക്ക് വരുന്നു. അത് ഈ ദിവസമാണ് 16. കൊച്ചു രാവിലെ ഉണ്ടാകുന്നു, ഞാൻ ഉച്ചയ്ക്ക് വണ്ടി കയറുന്നു. ഇവർ എൻ്റെ അനിയനും അൻവറും കൂടെ നേരെ മൈസൂർ വരുന്നു. അവിടെ ഞങ്ങൾ ധ്വന്യാലോകയിൽ ഒരു ദിവസം മുഴുവനും, നമുക്ക് താമസിക്കാൻ വേറെ സ്ഥലമൊന്നുമില്ല, ഞങ്ങൾ ലൈബ്രറി എല്ലാം റെഫർ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് അവിടുത്തെ യൂത്ത് ഹോസ്റ്റലിൽ താമസിക്കാൻ ചെല്ലുന്നു. യൂത്ത് ഹോസ്റ്റലിൽ താമസിക്കാൻ ചെല്ലുമ്പോൾ അവിടെ ഭയങ്കര മഴയാണ്. ഭയങ്കര മഴയെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഇടിയും വെട്ടി മഴ പെയ്യുന്നു, മഴയും പെശറും കാറ്റും എല്ലാം. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഡോർമിറ്ററിയിലാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ. അപ്പോൾ ഡോർമിറ്ററിയുടെ കോണിൽ നിന്ന് ഒരാൾ എഴുന്നേറ്റ് പ്രാണശക്തി ദേവി എന്നൊരു കവിത ഇടിവെട്ടുന്ന പോലെ ചൊല്ലുകയാണ്. ഒരു വണ്ണം കുറഞ്ഞ് MT വാസുദേവനെ പറ്റിയൊക്കെ ബഷീർ പറയുന്നാൽ നൂലനായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു മനുഷ്യൻ, ദീപ്തമായുള്ള കണ്ണുകൾ, എന്നിട്ടിങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞ മുടിയൊക്കെ ആയിട്ട് നിന്ന്. ഇപ്പോൾ ഇരിക്കുന്ന ആൾ ഇത്രയും തടിയുണ്ടെന്ന് തോന്നില്ല, അന്ന് വളരെ വണ്ണം കുറഞ്ഞില്ല ആളായിരുന്നു. കണ്ണിങ്ങനെ നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ആ പ്രാണശക്തി ദേവി എന്നുള്ള കവിതയാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ തുടക്കം. അൻവർ എന്നും മഴക്കാലം എഴുതി ചൊല്ലിക്കൊണ്ട് നടക്കുന്നത് ഞാൻ അത്യാവശ്യം ഒപ്പിച്ചൊക്കെ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തും കൊടുക്കും. അപ്പോൾ ഇദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേകത എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, ഇങ്ങേര് കവിത ചൊല്ലുകയും ഒരു വരി കവിത ചൊല്ലി 2 വരി കവിത ചൊല്ലിയിട്ട് അത് ഇമ്മീഡിയറ്റ് ടെക്സ്റ്റ് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യും. കടമനിട്ട രാമകൃഷ്ണൻ അദ്ദേഹത്തെ തർജ്ജമ വീരൻ എന്നാണ് വിളിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നത് ഇതുകൊണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ തുടക്കം. So I was just telling them about our first encounter. You got it. So can you demonstrate 2 lines of or 4 lines of Pranashakti Devi?
It's a very long poem. I don't remember the entire poem, but I can
2 lines.
recollect some lines. ಕೇಳು ಒಕ್ಕಣ್ಣರಾದ ಮುಕ್ಕಣ್ಣೆ, ಹೀಗೆ ಏಕೆ ಹೊರಡುತ್ತಿರುವೆ ನಗರಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬೀದಿ ಬೀದಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ನಿನ್ನನ್ನು ಹೊರಗಿಟ್ಟ ಗಲ್ಲಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ, ಜೀವಂತ ಮರಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ. ಕೂಗುಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಗಿ ಕರೆಯುವವರೆಗೆ, ಕೂಗೆ ಮಳೆಯಾಗಿ ಕರೆಯುವವರೆಗೆ, ಹೇ ಪ್ರಾಣಶಕ್ತಿ ದೇವಿ. So these are the lines I remember, disjointed lines. It's a long hymn to a deity who is not popular in the Hindu pantheon, Pranashakti Devi, but she is an important deity in Kashmiri Shaiva Tantras, which I later came to know. But the name occurred to me, Pranashakti.
At that time you did not know. You know, yeah. Also, your declamatory style of poetry recital and your affinity with the theatre and the performing arts make your journey towards performance poetry natural. Why do you think you have not chosen the path of Kadamanita, the early Balchandran Chulikadu, or Gadar, or your great friend Gorati Venkana from Telugu? Why didn't you become a performance poet?
See, there's something called performance art, which I find very shallow. I don't do that. Some people write bad poetry, then they walk about reading the poem, they call it performance poetry. I don't like it. Of course, I don't like the word performance, I use the word theatre. I'm from theatre, and I'm interested in the connecting points between poetry and theatre. I was writing only poetry for nearly a decade and a half. Then I realized, and some people also pointed out, there's a lot of dramatic element in my poetry. I can write drama. So that's when I started writing drama, nearly 19 years after I started writing poetry. And my first play, Mahachetra, became quite a success. It created a lot of controversy and it kicked up a lot of rows in Karnataka. It became a controversial book. So I continued to write for theatre also. But parallelly, I've been writing poetry. So after I went into theatre, my poetry became more dramatic and my theatre writing became more poetic.
Now, can we go back down memory lane to your early creative life, the formative years? I remember you mentioning to me that the Bandaya poet and activist and later Sahitya Academy's Southern Regional Secretary and later Secretary of the Sahitya Academy, Agrahara Krishnamurthy, and you were classmates. Like K. Sachidananda Murthy, the recently deceased senior journalist of the Delhi resident editor of Malayalam Manorama, as well as the well-known modern critic of Kannada, D.R. Nagaraj, who died young. You have also mentioned about the legendary filmmaker and journalist P. Lankesh, now better known as the father of the late Gauri Lankesh, being your teacher. How do these people figure in your early creative life?
I think they were all just there. Maybe I learnt a few things from them. But my stance was always different from theirs. For example, you mentioned Lankesh. Lankesh was an unrepentant modernist. And for him, tradition meant only Anglo-American literature. And I found that most of the modernist writers, including Ananthamurthy, had little or no knowledge about pre-modern Kannada. I wanted to be not an alien to a great tradition. I want to be part of that tradition. Of course, I learned a lot of things from modernism, but I'm basically not a modernist poet. You know, when Vinay Chandran came to Bangalore, he read out his that Anjadal Ganapati Stuti, which I later translated. And one of our Marxist poets asked him, "How can you, a modern poet, write about Ganapati?" Vinay Chandran said, "Before you become a modern poet, an ancient poet, you have to be a poet. As a poet, I write Ganesha because so many great poets have written about Ganesha." So I'm part of that large tradition, which is not a closed tradition, which is open to new changes in culture and accepting things. And it's like a river which continues to flow by taking in other tributaries. So that kind of tradition I believed in. Whereas most of the modernist greats, whether Girish Karnad or Lankesh or Ananthamurthy, etc., they were all, cut off from tradition.
Your first collection, Milarepa, came out in 1977 and was recognized immediately as a young talent's work. Can you recite a poem you like most from this collection and share with the audience your first feelings as you were hailed as the poet of the future? Did Gopalakrishna Adiga, who was also the teacher of our acclaimed fiction writer Paul Zakaria, discover you through this collection, or did he do so even earlier? Was it before this collection came out or after that Gopalakrishna Adiga felicitated you?
See, it was Gopal Krishna Adiga who first published my poem Milarepa.
Oh, I did not know that.
In the
Okay.
journal he was editing, it was called Sakshi. And when I sent this poem for publication to different journals and newspapers, my poem was rejected because people said it's like some ancient poetry. Whereas Gopal Krishna Adiga was the father of Kannada modernism. He recognized there was something new in my poetry and he published it. It was perhaps the first Kannada poem which takes material from Tibetan Buddhism. Because I started bringing into Kannada poetry material from non-European traditions and those areas of traditions which colonialism had neglected. So I went a lot into Sufism, I went a lot into Southeast Asian culture, Buddhism, Jainism and so on. It was in this context that I wrote this poem. I was deeply influenced by Milarepa's autobiography, so I wrote this poem. Now we are putting me to memory test, asking me to recite different poems. We don't have a text of, but I can recite the first line. ಕನಸು ಕಂಡಿದ್ದೀಗ ಕಣ್ಣ ಮುಂದಿನ ನೋಟ ಬಿದ್ದ ಮನೆ ಇಟ್ಟಿಗೆಗಳ ಗೂಡು ಸುತ್ತ ಮಂಜು ಇಲ್ಲಿತ್ತು ನನ್ನ ಮನೆಯ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇವು ಮಾತ್ರ ನನ್ನ ಮನೆಯ ಕೊನೆಯ ಕುರುಹು. This is how it begins.
Can you attempt a two-line translation? Just to
What was once a house is a heap of bricks now.
Okay.
There is this raucous noise of snow all around, and these are the only signs that there was once a house here. And everything is covered by the monotonous white of the snow.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was asking you to do the extempo translation that you have demonstrated right now. So your next collection...
Maybe towards the end I can read this in the English translation. I have the
Okay.
English translation later.
Okay. But
At the
this
end,
is just...
give me 10 minutes for the recitation of poems
Yeah.
in English at the end.
Yeah, I think we'll keep the last 10 minutes in. We'll plan it that way. Your next collection, Malebidda Naradalli, which came out in 1983, brought you all-round acclaim and held you up as the central figure of post-Bandaya poetry. I find from the archives on your poetry that the poem Samagra Bhimava won many hearts. Can you recite the poem for our audience, or we'll put it together to the end? Okay. Your next collection, Anukshana Charite, I think this is the one you brought out after we met in 1991. Or that slender volume, you remember, very narrow, long volume. Is that the one, this one?
Which one?
This one, your Anushkana Charite?
Huh?
Anukshana
The
Charite.
title of the book.
Yeah,
It has many long poems.
yeah,
Particularly one is Nagarjuna,
okay.
the Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, and one on Shams Tabriz.
Yeah,
You can recite Shams Tabriz, a poem where the speaker is Jalaluddin Rumi, and he speaks these lines, a dramatic monologue after the murder of his guru Shams Tabriz. ಗುಲಾಬಿ ತೋಟಗಳ ಕಸಾಯಿ ಖಾನೆಗಳಾಗಿವೆ ಎಂದು, ಮಧುಶಾಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬ ಪ್ರೇಮಿ ವಧೆಯಾಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಎಂದು, ಉಳಿದ ಯಾವ ದ್ರಾಕ್ಷಿ ತೋಟದ ಯಾವ ಗೊಂಚಲನೆ ಹಿಂಡು ರಸವಿಲ್ಲ ರಕ್ತ ಬರೀ ರಕ್ತ, ಶಮ್ಸ್ ತಬ್ರೀಜ್ ನಿನ್ನ ರಕ್ತ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊತ್ತು ಹೋಗಿದೆ ಜಂಜಮ್ನ ಜೀವಚಲ.
I remember your poem on the Sufi saint of Bangalore. I forget the name. And also another Sufi saint of Baghdad, which you used to recite at the time. You remember that?
Yes, it's a poem on Baghdad. The
Yeah.
Baghdad was being bombed by the US, and it's a long poem. It's a kind of a prayer again. It is the description of the war in the Middle East, and then the poem shifts to Bangalore, and then I start talking to my Sufi master, who was an unknown saint of Bangalore, who belongs to the silsila of, that great saint from Baghdad. So
Yeah,
he goes to
that's
Baghdad,
how,
comes
yeah.
back, and then from the battleground, it returns to my own city, home city, where I see the footmarks of the saint dipped in blood,
Okay.
strewn with rose petals. And I say, this is the path to the future of the world. Let this guide the world to better times.
That was about after or during the Gulf War that you wrote, the American imposed war, yeah, 83, yeah. I remember you translating D. Vinaychandran's poems Anchidal Vinayakam, Mailatamadu Nee Maname, and a few others. We were sitting in Cubbon Park and
Yes, yes.
doing that. Can you just, there's a 2-3 lines, can
Yes,
you
I
just
always
recite for
enjoy
the-
translating poems
Yeah,
from Indian language, and as much as possible, I try to reproduce the same
Yeah.
rhythm. And I remember the first stanza is from Lokatrayagadavartisalu Mukannanu tananati ikkalu Vameshwari Shivayodeyane Shivani Vagartave Hurrendalochisi Pradakshine Mari Prasadava Kumba Tubu Marudina Ganapana Kumnudayana Patananna Pata.
വഴിയൻ വഴിയാണ് പഥനെന്ന പഥ അവസാനിക്കുന്നത് ഓർമ്മയില്ല അതല്ലേ അഞ്ചുതൽ വിനായകം കൊമ്പും തുമ്പിയുമുള്ള എന്നൊക്കെയുള്ള കൃത്യമായിട്ട് അത് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ വിനയേന്ദ്രൻ്റെ ഒറിജിനൽ ഞാൻ മറന്നുപോയി, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് മയിലാട്ടമാടും നീ മനമേ.
Navilatani Nadu Manave, Navanava Navilatani Nadu Manave.
So this
In
Vinaychandran was a common
Malayalam
friend.
is called Mahilatam. In Kannada, Navilu is male.
Nahil,
But I added Navanava. Navanava is new kinds of dances. Navanava, Navil. I added this bit. So that's how when I translate, I also change,
yeah.
which will help the poem come out better in the target language.
Now I remember this in conjunction with our sitting together in the Cubbon Park, in conjunction with the kind of incognito life you led during that terrible stressful times you faced after the publication of Mahachaitra and the controversy. There were actually possible assassins after you, and the police and some Dalit activists were always around you, offering you a protective ring. Can you remember those days for the audience?
Yeah, I was targeted for writing this play Mahachaitra because it's about centers around the death of a great saint Basavanna. And according to the myths and legends, he just merged with Lord Shiva. Legends. That's a figurative way of saying that somebody died.
Yeah.
In my play, I have not rejected this possibility. I have also pointed out other ways in which his life may have ended. He may have been murdered, he may have committed suicide, we don't know what. There's no historical records. This was irritated fundamentalist Lingayat community who claimed inheritance of the Vaishnava tradition. They have no right according
That was
to me.
93-94.
And they were up against my life, and one Congress MLC, Bhimana Kandre, he said Lingai should declare fatwa against me.
Okay.
And newspapers described me as Salman Rushdie of Karnataka. I hated that because I don't like Salman Rushdie at all. But that was the label that came to me, and it was stressful days, but nothing happened because something protected me. So some of my supporters were beaten up.
So when
Their houses were attacked, and so on. And of course, assassins were after me.
we used to take the back streets,
Yes, yes,
never
yes.
coming on to the main road walking.
And it was a very wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I think poets should not live too comfortably. They should go through such troubled experiences also.
How has your collection of poems, Kavita Idinava Rege, been selected? Are they all poems
That
you
is
have written?
that is the first edition of my collected poems, which came out some 2013.
Yeah.
After that, I have.
You won the Sahitya Academy Award for this, no?
No, not for that. I won Sahitya Academy for a book called Malbina Academy Yasi,
Okay.
The Mist Through the Valleys. And then after that, another collected version of collected poems has come out last year. It's about 900 pages.
Okay.
It's called Hogi Bani Rutage. It means goodbye seasons.
So all this is
And after that, two poem collections have come out.
okay.
And the latest book of poems has come out just now, last week.
Okay. I did not know that. Magi Parva, your collection of haikus you wrote in Kannada, sounds particularly interesting.
Yeah.
And is the haiku an accepted form in Kannada or you introduced it?
There was no haiku writing tradition in Kannada, but I am very deeply interested in Japanese art, Japanese painting.
That is after your visit to Kyoto.
No, even before that,
even
I have
before
been
that.
engaged in Japanese art and poetry for about 30 years, reading haiku poems, studying Japanese arts, particularly Zen paintings and so on, Zen philosophy and so on. So I had the opportunity to go to Japan for the first time in 2010. I stayed in Japan for 2 months and I visited the important cities and particularly the important sites like this rock garden of Kyoto, in Ryoanzi Temple. So that's when I wrote a series of haiku poems about my experiences in Japan. And one of the longest poems in the collection is about this rock garden.
Particularly that garden, yeah. I was asking.
Meditation in the rock garden.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
And
that.
I've been writing haikus, I've also been translating haikus, and my translations of haiku poetry has been evolving.
Okay.
Now I translate haiku poems very differently than the prosaic translations I used to do. Now I discovered the form which is closest to haiku is the triplet form of Kannada Desi meter, folk meter. For example, this is a famous poem by Basho, The Silent Pond, the frog leaping in, splash. It's a very famous poem. And somebody has written an essay in English on 37 ways of translating Basho. So I done several the latest one into triplet. Sappulillada kola kappe mala kenegedu Sappulayitu kala 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 allola kallola kala. So in Japanese, there's no space for onomatopoeia. It's a very visual language. If Kannada is a very onomatopoeic language.
Yes,
So I have to translate it according to the genius of my language, not to keep to the original. Keeping the spirit by breaking its body.
Okay. Your English translation of selected Kannada vachanas titled I Keep Vigil of Rudra
Yeah.
stands out in its language and presentation as opposed to A.K. Ramanujan's speaking of Shiva. What are the major differences of your versions when
See,
compared
Ramanujan,
to Ramanuja's?
We bow down to him because he started translating vachanas into readable English. And the translations were done earlier by scholars, eminent scholars, translated vachanas into a kind of biblical language. For example, there's a vachana by Basavana, don't steal, don't tell lies, etc. So there, Armando Menezes was professor of English in Karnataka, translated this as, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, etc. But vachanas are written in everyday language. Like when our people started translating Shakespeare into Kannada, it was the language of Kannada Bible they translated Shakespeare into. So they thought that Shakespeare was a kind of scripture. So vachanas are not scripture, strictly speaking, because the Veerashaiva tradition does not believe in any scripture other than your own personal experience. They are sacred writings, but not scriptures like Bible or something. Ramanujan did it into the spoken English, which was a very welcome thing. It read very well, and it made Vachanas internationally well known. But because Ramanujan's knowledge of original Kannada text was very limited, he made many mistakes. The major problem is the language of the Vachanas is dialogic. It's always talking to somebody. Ramanujan made it monologic. He removed the addresses. For example, Yedesankudave, Mamarave, Beladingade, Kogile, one of the Vachanas by Kamadi. You foliages, you mango trees, you coil birds, you moonlight, you. So Vachanas always either talk to God, talk to human beings. For example, when they address religious people, they say, Veda Purushira, Nima Veda Veda, you people of the Vedas, your Vedas went to dogs because they could know nothing. Purana Purushira, Nima Purana Pureshira, you people of Puranas, your Puranas went to dogs because they couldn't complete anything. Agama Purushira, Nima Agama Ariyade Hoitalla. Oh, Agama people, your Agamas went to dogs because they could understand nothing. So this is how they address. So Ayya, one word Ayya address. Of course you have it in Malayalam also. In Kannada, Ayya does sometimes it means friend, sometimes it means sir, sometimes it means father. Actually, the word Ayya is the into Dravidian languages, it's translated into Dravidian language, Prakrit word Ajja.
Okay.
Arya in Sanskrit. Okay. So Ramanujan has left out these addresses, so poems become very monologic, like the English poetry of the Anglo-American poetry of the 70s, translated 12th century Vachanas into the Anglo-American poetry language of 70s. But I took liberties with English and I tried to get the translations closer to the source text. I just wanted them to be readable English, not very good English.
So, wow, the word you coined, Englishing. Englishing.
I didn't want to do English.
Englishing was, we used to discuss this in our Indian literature days.
In fact, I wanted to Kannadize English. See, there are two models of translating into English. One is majority of Indian translators, Ramanujan, Dilip Chitra, etc. doing. What they do is they English the poem. Dilip Chitra's Tukaram translations, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas in Africa we have another model of translation like Obi Patek and others. When Africans write English, Amos Tutola and others, they do violence to the English language to inject African idiom into English. And I prefer that kind of model. That's what I do in my translations.
So you've also written original poems in English and collected them in a volume, I remember that. But nothing about it is available online. Can you recite a couple of those poems or you'll keep the recitation
I have them.
toward the end?
So, yeah,
Please remember this.
Yes.
So I'll remind you at the time.
And you also remember to keep
Yeah, I will. It's half time almost. So we are arrived at your spiritual writing. Can you talk about your spiritual writing as compared to your creative writing? What is the difference between your spiritual writing and your creative writing?
The greatest writers in my tradition are spiritual poets. Maybe not because they're spiritual poets, that's the way it is. I don't know about the Malayalam tradition, at least in Hindi, for example, the greatest challenge for somebody writing in Hindi today is a poet like Kabir, Tulsidas. So for me, the greatest challenge when I write poetry in Kannada, this is what our modernists missed out. Greatest challenge is Akka Mahadevi. No poet in Kannada for the last 2000 years has been able to excel the finesse of Akka Mahadevi's poetry. So, and also I was brought up in a very religious family, and I also, at the same time in my youth, I was drawn to Marxism. I became an unrepentant Marxist. I wanted to become a trade unionist at some point of time to give up my job and so on. Then I was introduced to EMS, who came for this campaigning against Indira Gandhi in the historic Chikmagalur elections. I was introduced to him, and he said, this budding poet, comes from a well-known family, and he wants to become a party member and trade union. EMS said, do you have a job? I said, yes. He said, keep it. Don't quit your job. Ours is a poor party in Karnataka. We can't feed you. You be there. You don't need to come to a party. You see the truth and write it. We will use it politically. So only EMS could have stopped me from becoming a trade union. Otherwise, it almost decided. So luckily, I didn't become that. Maybe it ended up as a corrupt trade unionist later. So I was so deep into Marxism. You know?
Kadamarati also told me, I was
I used to
also
go for the
ready to resign at one point.
organization with BD workers in different places. And then I was also into Dalit movements. I was very close to Dalit movements. At the same time, unlike my Marxist friends and my comrades and Dalit friends, I was also deeply into spirituality. And many people said this was contradictory. It may be contradictory, but I found that the one is the extension of the other.
How do you manage to practice your spirituality even in public places? In such times, you know, it is easily misunderstood in a partisan way, you know, if you are openly spiritual. Now, how do you find it, you know, practicing?
Spirituality is not spirituality if you need a special place and time. Spirituality is spirituality if you can practice it anywhere. There was a great saint of the Kashmiri Shaiva order, Swami Lakshmanju in Kashmir. He had a beautiful ashram in Srinagar, and then one of his disciples, who was an IAS officer, was transferred to Delhi. And he went and complained to Babaji. He said, Babaji, I'm so happy, there was a lake here, beautiful, tranquil place. What can I do in Delhi? He said, no, there's a better place in Delhi for meditation. He said, which one? He says, New Delhi railway station. You go and meditate there. So, in fact, I went deep into Buddhist meditation. In the Buddha's Satipatthana Sutta, which is a manual meditation, he says that meditation you can practice anywhere. If there's some disturbance, you meditate on disturbance. Because that's the best subject for meditation. If something disturbs you, meditate on that. So, this is an inclusive way of looking at spirituality. Whereas these days, this all the export quality yogis, you know, they talk about an exclusive way of practicing yoga. You have to go to some ashram and go to some Shivratri bash, and you have to pay 2 lakhs if you want to sit in the front row. You know who I am talking about and which place. So this kind of CEOs of more export quality spirituality have become, kind of role models for it. It is very bad because the greatest spiritual teachers and practitioners and poets, they came from all walks of life. In Kannada, in 12th century, the great saint poets which wrote vachanas were cobblers, carpenters, and barbers, and so on. So spirituality is something that anybody can practice anywhere. If somebody says you need these things to do that, he's a bloody liar. I don't believe him.
Very close to it, you know, in the field of Indian aesthetics, which you were Dean of the Faculty of Fine Arts in JNU and the Director of the School of Arts and Aesthetics for years. So in the field of Indian aesthetics, the great gurus like Bharata Muni perfected the theories.
See, the problem is when you talk about Indian aesthetics, there's many books on Indian aesthetics. The one was written in Kannada. Tinam Shrikante was a great authority in Sanskrit poetics. It's called Indian poetics, but it's only about Sanskrit. The problem is Sanskrit is an important part of Indian tradition of poetics and aesthetics. It's not the only one. Equally important is the Sangam aesthetics of the Dravidian part of India, which has a totally different kind of conceptualism, like Thinai, which you don't find in, if Rasa and Dwani are the hallmarks of North Indian poetics, this Thinai is the hallmark of Dravidian poetics. Plus, these are two classical traditions. Our Bhakti traditions, they created their own aesthetic. I call it inbuilt poetics. They didn't write books on poetics, but they talk about poetry in the context of their works. For example, Basavanna, in one of his poems, says, Vocha Bajavanare, Taramana Sarasvanare, I don't know the rules of beats and gongs, I don't know the meter, Kudal Sangamadeva, Kedilavagi, oh Lord Kudal Sangamadeva, because nothing can take away in anything from you. I sing as I please. I sing as I please. The spontaneity and the rejection of rules, that is the hallmark of Bhakti poetics. And in this poem, I call it the manifesto of Bhakti poetry. Bhakti poetics is the poetics of freedom. Unlike rule-bound poetics of Sanskrit tradition or Dravidian tradition. And our folk traditions have their own poetics. For example, one of my students has worked on the poetics of Meitei tradition of Manipur. There's a great narrative dance form in Manipur called Lei Haroba. And they have their own text, which was in the oral transmission. Recently, one of my students has recovered it, translated it into English. And surprisingly, the concepts of this Lei Haroba tradition are very close to Dravidian Tamil poetics.
Okay.
So it's a lot more than just Sanskrit tradition. We have to consider Tamil tradition and also the Bhakti tradition and folk traditions. Plus, a lot of other things happened during modernism. For example, if you look at Tagore's aesthetics, was he only a Sanskrit? He knew a lot of Sanskrit poetry, he was not imitating it, and probably was not aware of Tamil poetics, though he learned Carnatic music very late in his life. But he knew a lot of folk and devotional poetry. He learned a lot. If you read Gitanjali in the original, you see very deep influence of the Chandidas and Vidyapati and other regional poets of Bengal of the northeast.
Also, he was he had bowl
Yes,
singers around him.
Yes.
Now we'll switch over to your dramatic writing and theatre part, because we have to keep the time, and towards the end we have to set about 10 minutes for your recitation. You are a Sangeet Natak Academy Award winning playwright. You are an eagerly followed figure in the drama and theatre world of Malayalam also. You were at least, that we have discussed earlier. D. Appakuttan, Chandradasan and his Logadharmit troupe and Sam Kutti Pattamkari. So he was your student in School of Arts and Aesthetics. Many of your plays like Mahachaitra, Sultan Tipu, etc. were translated into Malayalam and produced, I believe. Can you just make a general remark about all those
See, I
things
started
together?
by writing plays. Mahachaitra was a play on this Bhakti movement of 12th century, about Basavanna. I wanted to write about the key events of Karnataka history. Then I wondered which is the next important phase of Karnataka history. Tipu Sultan. I know Tipu Sultan is hated a lot in Kerala for obvious reasons. There are some reasons why people hate him. But he was not that kind of fanatic when it came to Karnataka. And the one thing about Tipu is that he was consistently against the British colonialism.
Okay.
Hyderabad Nizam and this Peshwas gave in to East India Company. Tipu never did. So he was a freedom fighter. It was about that. Then I said, which one should I write next? Then I wrote a play on Shakespeare, because
Shakespeare
the
Swapnana,
impact
okay.
of English transformed our culture, and Shakespeare was the icon of British culture which transformed us. And then I stopped writing historical plays because I realized that mythology and folklore have greater impact in people's minds. So I wrote two plays on Dalit folk narratives. Manteswami became immensely popular. It has done about 900 shows to date in Karnataka. And Madhya, the other play has also become very famous outside India. In Assam, it's a great success. In tribal areas of North, it's a great success, and so on. And then one play on Toda story. And then now I wrote three plays on Silappadigaram, because my mother was Tamil Nadu. I was very close to Silappadigaram tradition. And then of late, I didn't see. I write one after writing one play. Unless the next play is going to be completely different from the previous one, I don't write. Now, my latest play is on the last days of Krishna. It's called Maya Nataka.
Okay.
I completed writing it a few months ago. It's yet to be staged.
It's yet to be staged.
I may write more plays, but I don't know what one I'm going to do, because I don't plan my writing.
Yeah, when we were discussing Mahachaitra, there were others also who wrote on Mahachaitra. You remember one or two plays?
Lankesh wrote a play called Sankranti, Girish Karnad Taladanda,
Yeah.
and Chandrasekhar Kamba wrote a play called Shivaratri, among the famous ones, several others. But the difference is that they're about individuals. In my
Okay.
play Mahachaitra, it's not about individuals. It's about the whole artisan poets who created this movement. There is no individual hero in my play. It's a kind of the concept, Eisenstein's concept of mass hero. The
Okay.
Russian, Marxist Russian director Eisenstein talked about mass hero. So I have the mass hero. This is the difference. And my emphasis was on not only history, mythology, legend, and other oral traditions.
Okay.
And in my play, Basavanna never appears on stage. He's a kind of Paroksha Nayaka, like Yogandarayana and Pratikna Yogandarayana of Basa. Shall we read the poem?
Your Kannada translation of King Lear.
See, I translated Shakespeare King Lear. The lecturer said it's pointless to translate Shakespeare, should be adopted. I've done two adaptations of Macbeth, for example. One is Maranayaka Drishtanta, which has been very successful on stage. And the second one is called Macbeth Atta, which has also been very successful on stage.
And your Mallam
That's
Mane Hotlu.
an adaptation of Lorca's
Lorca's Spanish play, The Shoemaker's
Prodigious
Prodigious Wife. How was it received?
It was a very popular play.
Okay.
It was a humorous play, very popular.
Okay.
So now we have
Yeah,
What the
I'll
poem?
just come down to that. I think about your experiences of theatre in the Northeast, especially in Assam and Manipur.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll come.
See, because I believe that poetry, of late, I've come to the conclusion that it's wrong to discuss poetry at theatre only in the socio-historical context, because its influence transcends regional borders. Because my play, this on Madari Madaya the cobbler, Oja Kanailal, the great director of Manipur, he was very close to me. He discovered it in English. He shared it with a young director in Assam, Shikracharya Rabha. And he said, this play is telling our story. He was from the Rabha tribal community. He said, this play is telling our story. He wanted to do it in Assamese. And later, with Kanailal, he started a new theatre movement in a small tribal village in Assam called Rampura in Golapara district. And he called it under the banyan tree, something like under the salt tree. That's the name of that theatre movement. Very original kind of theatre movement. And my play, Madari Madaya, was the first play. And this play led to a new theatre movement among Rabha community of the Northeast, in Assam. So another play of mine, Sati, which is based on a Toda story, which is written in the style of a Japanese no play, that also
I
became
remember this
very popular in the Northeast. So, for reasons which we don't know very well, sometimes works travel to spaces which were never imagined by the author. Because I didn't know that there was a community called Rabha. They didn't know that there was a poet called Shiva Prakash. But my play goes there. It becomes instrumental in setting off a new theatre movement there. So I had this, and I always say that there are only two directors in India, modern Indian directors, who produced theatre which was modern and also Indian. For example, B.V. Karnat is a great director, but he is not modern. He is a repeater. Alkazi is a modern director, but he does no tradition. Only two directors knew the tradition and also were modern. One is Habib Tanvir Saab, the other is Oja Kanailal from Manipur. So these two are my masters. So I've learnt a lot from Oja Kanailal. And I also worked very close with him. I've written a book on Sabitri, Ima Sabitri, who's Kanailal's wife, and Kanailal and Sabitri produced that kind of theatre which they call the theatre of the earth together. My latest book is on Sabitri, how an illiterate woman becomes such a great stage actress in India. It's about her journey into theatre. So this is one of my, so I'm very deeply interested in Northeastern theatre.
Can you share with us briefly about your experience in Japan, the theater workshops in Kyoto?
No,
Briefly.
I didn't participate in any theater event in Japan because I wanted to watch a no play, but the tickets were so expensive I couldn't afford them.
Okay.
But I
Well, I
only read about Japanese. I've seen a couple of no and kabuki productions which travel to India. Beyond that, my understanding is only through books.
Okay. So can you, just last week, about 10 days ago, you were in Africa, Nigeria, meeting your
Yeah, I was invited
African
by
sister
the
playwright.
greatest living Nigerian playwright, Tess Onwime. She's supposed to be the greatest playwright in Africa after Wole Soyinka. She has been my friend for 10 years. She was a professor in University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. She retired and now she has settled down in Nigeria. She wanted to host me there. I went there and she organized a dance program for me, a theater performance for me. And I was interviewed by the national television and so on. So I had a very good time. And it was a very different kind of experience because Africa is different from other countries I visited. One thing that surprised me that Nigeria is a very clean country. It's cleaner than Europe. We normally associate black people, don't associate with that kind of cleanliness, but it's a very clean country and people are very good.
Okay. So you, as a theater director, I have seen at least two plays that you directed, Galileo and Sundardas, in your...
Now
in your
I'll answer in 2 minutes. I want to read the poem.
yeah, but just after
I
this,
started-
Shiva, I have just one last question. Plus,
Make
you-
this the last please.
no. But after this, one last question.
You ask something.
Both together. So you are a globe-trotting poet. You have been visiting all continents, and you are not just an Indian poet. You are so popular in South America, in Mexico. Can you share with us your experience there?
So for some reason, I've been fascinated by Latin America, and it's very expensive to travel to Latin America. Most often, they don't pay me my ticket. I am a pensioner, but I don't mind buying my tickets and going there. And there is something, I don't know, I can't define it. I feel very close to the culture of Latin American countries. There's a lot of violence and there's a lot of poverty in those. They're rich countries, but people are poor, like in India. They're all rich countries inhabited mostly by the poor. And they have reciprocated. For example, two of my poetry books have been published in Latin America, one in El Salvador, the other in Costa Rica. And this year, they promised to bring out another volume of poems from Ecuador and also from Mexico, somebody has promised. So I'm very happy to be published in Latin America.
And you won an award.
Recently, the International Poetry Festival Committee of Ecuador gave me the second International Poetry Award for 2023 in November this year.
And you have the Indian Kusumagraj National Award and the Sahitya
Yes, I
Academy
have
2
some,
awards. All that, you are sitting here, you have almost all except the Nanpid. Is it on the way or something? You have
That's
any
okay.
idea?
These are the crimes of three poets getting
Yeah.
awards. So it's okay. If it doesn't get award, it's okay. But the greatest award, if somebody is doing my play in Assam or in a tribal community, and if somebody likes my poetry in a small town in Mexico or Costa Rica or El Salvador, that is a greater award to me than these awards. For example, I have a poem about Chile, Machu Picchu. And
I remember that.
when I read it out in Costa Rica, and the people there said that my poem is better than Pablo Neruda's poem.
We published in Indian literature. I
Yes,
remember
you
that, yeah.
published it in Indian literature.
Now,
So now there's no time for
I think
poetry.
I'm please,
They're not letting me read my poem.
please read the poems now. We have exactly 10 minutes. So you wanted 10 minutes and it's there.
Okay, I read the first English. I don't know whether I wrote it in English first or in Kannada first. I'll read this in English. Yeah. Not to swear. I'll read some Kannada poems also. When I let a moment slip from my hands, a whole age slipped away. Before I could bat my eyelid, the whole world dawned and set. Between my in and out breaths, a whole kalpa had gone. I did it all in ignorance, and all was lost. Yes, I could lay my hands on everything, but could hold nothing. The treasure buried deep inside the earth, huge monuments that light and wind corroded, the colossal underwater cities, memories wasted in heart's depths, sweetest moments spent with dear ones. All of them were very close, but nothing stayed with me. What did they earn? What did they save up? What sort of life they lived? Kings of kings, gods of gods, the poorest of the poor, the stingiest of the stingy, and the meanest of the mean. This is going. So this is another poem because my friend, Maitreyi Kanu, she got married to an English poet called Rhys Davids. And when they completed 3 years of their marriage, I wrote a poem for them. I've written a lot of personal poems like this. 3 years, yes, 3 years in calendar, 3 summers and 3 long winters, lived on continents divided by oceans and land masses. 3 years feel like 3 minutes, 3 seconds. When you look back, 3 years come and gone. Let every minute or the next 3 calendar years stretch into 3 yugas, 3 kalpas, for there is no guarantee of eternity except in the passing fragrance of evanescence. Okay, Kannada poems, I'll recite poems which I remember, preferably songs from my place. Yes. This is a song from my play called Madurai Kanda, which is based on Silappadigaram. It's a kind of song of blessings, blessing people who are sitting out in a travel. Ninna ಬಯಕೆಯ ಕಾಯೆ ಹಣ್ಣಾಗಲಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಹಾದಿಯ ಮಣ್ಣು ಹೊನ್ನಾಗಲಿ ಅಂಜಿಕೆಯ ನಾಡಿನಲ್ಲಿ ರವಿ ಮೂಡಲಿ ಮಂಜಿನ ಕಣಿವೆಗಳು ತಿಳಿಯಾಗಲಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಬಯಕೆಯ ಕಾಯಿ ಹಣ್ಣಾಗಲಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಹಾದಿಯ ಮಣ್ಣು ಹೊನ್ನಾಗಲಿ ವಿಧಿಯೆಂಬ ಕುರುಡಿಗೆ ಕಣ್ಮೂಡಲಿ ಅವಳ ಕಣ್ಣಲ್ಲಿ ಕರುಣೆ ಹೊರಹೊಮ್ಮಲಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಬಯಕೆಯ ಕಾಯಿ ಲೆಟ್ ದ berry of your desires ripen into a fruit. Let the dust on your path turn into gold. Let the sun rise on the mist-filled valleys. In the fear-filled lands, let the mist-filled valleys be cleared. Let this blind woman, fate, get her eyes back, and let compassion ooze out of your eyes. Let the berry of your desires ripen into a fruit. Let the dust on your path turn into gold. This is one song. The other is a lullaby from my play Madhavi. So Madhavi is putting her daughter Manimegalai to sleep. I first translate, then I sing the original. Sleep, daughter, sleep. Like cloud on the lap of the sky, sleep, daughter, sleep. Sleep, daughter, sleep, like thunder in the heart of the cloud, sleep, my daughter, sleep. Sleep, my daughter, sleep, like volcano in the ocean's womb, sleep, my daughter, sleep. Sleep, my daughter, sleep, like yearnings in the depths of her souls, sleep, my daughter, sleep. This is the translation. Original is like this. And Vinay Chandran wanted to translate, but he passed away without doing it. Jo 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 Malagawa Yauva Malagawa Malagawa Nana Magade Malagawa Jo 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 ಗಗನಾದ ಮಡಿಲಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಗಿಲು ಮಲಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಯವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳೇ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಮುಗಿಲಿನ ಎದೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಶಿಡಿಲು ಮಲಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಯವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳೇ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಕಡಲಿನ ಬಸಿರಲ್ಲಿ ಕಿಚ್ಚು ಮಲಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಯವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳೇ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಅಂತರಾಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಯಕೆ ಮಲಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಅಂತರಾಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬಯಕೆ ಮಲಗುವ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಯವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ನನ್ನ ಮಗಳೇ ಮಲಗವ್ವ ಜೋ 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 ಜೋ. This time up. You have, how much more time do we have?
Are there questions to Shiv Prakash that you want to ask? We have 5 minutes.
So it was an enjoyable session. You mentioned about being meditative in the midst of cacophony also. Likewise, does the muzzling voices or the, that stifling atmosphere impact your creativity in any way?
Which one?
The all-pervading atmosphere of stifling voices, does it impact your creativity, or do you feel a bit hesitant to express yourself fully?
Yes, yes. See, I write poetry when something ruptures my understanding of the world, you know. Some cacophony happens to me. And when I pay attention to that cacophony, deep down, I see melody and rhythm in that. And that is the healing part of poetry. So a lot of poets, what they do is, they create disturbances intellectually, not experientially. So I wait for something to threaten the order I've set my mind into. That's the time when I have to become active and to restructure my mind. To kind of digest that so-called troubling factor into my creative experience.
Shiva, you mentioned about the translations of ancient or medieval text while you translating that kind of text into a contemporary scenarios, in contemporary language. See, it's a hypothetical question. And also a reason behind that question is Attu Ravi Verma translated Kambaramayana from Tamil. Kambaramayana is, you know, it's a very ancient text.
I know.
But he uses the almost a contemporary kind of language. Some nuances of the old languages should be there. For example, he never uses the metrical structure. But there is a rhythm. And I asked him also, he told it should be in the contemporary language. That is his position. I am not going into the judgment of that position, but that is a hypothetical. If you translate Tulasidas or Kambaramayana into Kannada, we talking about, you mentioned about translating from Indian languages, the Vajana to English and that kind of issues. But the question is, how we, from the Indian tradition, if it is Kambaramayana, the text you are going to translate into Kannada, what kind of language we can suggest? Hypothetically,
Of course, I want to be alive to the melody and rhythm of the source, but I want to use contemporary Kannada because I am translating for my readers in in my contemporary times, not for the ancient readers. Okay? So, and that's why I believe classics need to be translated again and again, because classics are something worth preserving in the content, and they have to be recreated in the language they are written in, so that the contemporary language integrate the best of tradition.
Kabir, translated by Aravind Krishna Maroda, that is the contemporary language, or even the most modern language, even an American slang kind of thing. That experiments are going on like that. Jerry Pinto translated.
So sometimes
things are
too much contemporaneizing is also bad. Recently, I saw a translation of Bhagavad Gita. I don't want to name the translator, very famous translator. In that translator, Arjuna addresses Krishna as Prof. Please tell me, Prof. His latest American slang. So that somehow kind of stultifies the source text. And contemporary,
Japanese translations you mentioned, kind of words uses for the haikus.
yes.
That's why I asked that question.
Some of the texts I translate again and again, because I did one adaptation of Macbeth. Now I've done the second. I may do 2 more, 3 more, I don't know. Because that text is, very dear to my heart. I want to work on whatever is dear to my heart, close to my heart.
So those haikus he was singing. You see, in the original haiku, no one sings. But here in Kannada, he was singing those haikus.
See, for example, there's a haiku by Issa. He says, come and see the beautiful flowers of this painful world. I translate it into Kannada triplet. Akkayya ni bare, annayya ni baro, chikka chikka hoogalu, ee dukka tumbida lokadalli. So I translate it into Kannada triplet. So, and this is not the final word, and somebody may do it into some other meter, I don't know. I see. Great.
Sir, you said your poem became. Hello.
Yes, sir.
You said your poem becomes more and more dramatic, and your drama became more and more poetic. Could you just explain a little bit on that?
See, as I said, there are 2 traditions in Indian poetry. One is monologic. If you look at epic poetry, drama is kind of included in it, okay, embedded into it. It's basically indirect speech poetry, which is narrative. Whereas folk and bhakti traditions are direct speech, talking to somebody. Okay. In fact, in Europe, the modernist tradition was a reaction away from monologic poetry into dialogic poetry. Okay? English modernism, for example. But when I was writing, our Kannada poetic language has lost its moorings in or predominantly dialogic traditions of Karnataka. So I brought that back into poetry. And our modern playwrights, the Girish Karnad, has started writing very prosaic plays, Euro-centric kind of plays. So I wanted to bring in poetic kinds of dramatic writing into Kannada. That I did. So in both poetry and drama, I was trying to recover the best of our traditions, the dialogue tradition, and bring it to our contemporary usage.
Any more questions? Is it time for winding up? Okay.
So the
So-
it tells the Nella parting day.
Thank you very much, sir. Those of us are here, we were, kept enthralled by your, almost non-stop narration of whatever your genius about, and the kind of 2-3 different ways, you were poetry, your spiritual writing, your theatre, your playwriting, and your theatre, and your international reach. All these things came under discussion or your narration right now. We thank you. And I thank the audience for being patient and overshooting the time by 10 minutes. Or is it time? We've taken 10 more minutes now. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you all.